Welcome to Breaking Sales, a podcast dedicated to helping you have tough, meaningful, and rewarding conversations with your prospects and clients. In meaningful, what we mean is these are the conversations you truly feel like you are the prospect or client's conversational peer. There's no anxiousness or uncertainty holding you back. You feel a sense of calm and confidence in asking the tough questions. You're not thrown off by the bad news, and you expect the prospect to think about and invest into the conversation as much as you do. On Breaking Sales, we use the filter of psychology and innate human behavior to deconstruct the many misleading sales approaches that actually work against your efforts to build trust and close the business. Let's get started. Have you ever experienced development fatigue? This is a complicated topic and not one size fits all. The biggest challenge is that we often feel fatigue before any real work is done to actually improve. What I'm going to share with you right now is very important. I want you to think about it. There are 4 phases of development, and depending on your environment and attitude, each one within itself can feel exhausting. Phase 1, and you've been there, the effort you invest in learning, reading a book, listening to a podcast, attending a webinar or a workshop. Phase 2, working hard to avoid judging what you're learning. Remembering that our desire and our ability to judge something helps our ego and pride discount what's new, and it allows us to hang on to what we've already learned and done. Phase 3, you have to work even harder to try and assess what you're learning from an objective point of view. This takes some real self-awareness and fortitude because your ego and pride don't want to be proven wrong, and so hanging on to what you've done feels vindicating. Phase 4, allowing yourself to experiment, accepting mistakes to put what you've learned to practice. This whole process can be exhausting because there's a difference between just consuming information and actually doing what's required to develop a new skill or behavior. You have to quiet the ego and accept the probability of making some mistakes. And if you spend all your time stuck in phases 1, 2, and 3, you're never putting yourself in a position to experience any kind of payoff by actually taking action and trying something new, which is phase 4. You get stuck in the academics, but never generate any true reward. This can leave you feeling burned out. That's what Pam and I are getting into today, what a real commitment to getting better actually requires, and what the fatigue you're feeling along the way might actually be telling you. Let's get started. Good morning.
Good morning.
Seems the flavor of the day, at least the last month or so, has been professional development. What is fatigue? Is there such a thing as fatigue regarding the time that we spend or the effort that we spend on professional development?
I think it's such a good question. I don't know that many people stop to really pay attention to that or go through that process. I love the question.
Yeah, I mean, the basic, right, answer would be just from AI and so forth is anywhere between 5 to 10 hours a week. So for the listeners out there, when you think about professional development, which we'll define here in a minute, the recommended allocation of time would be 5 to 10 hours a week. That's right. I'm sure a lot of people are scratching their heads right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely they are. I can only imagine. But I think it's worth talking a little bit about how we define development. You know me, Dan. I have a hard time with people that don't really understand what development is, how they measure their development, all that good stuff. So I think it would be worth spending some time understanding what development is first and foremost, and then figuring out where you're applying that time.
The 5 things that I kind of came up with from an action standpoint or to-do standpoint, just in general, when you think about professional development, I'll share them. Number 1, easy, right? But have a clear goal in mind. What are you working toward? I think right there and then is quite a big step forward. So I do think that people go to seminars and workshops and read books and listen to podcasts, which kudos for doing that. But I don't know if anybody or how many of them truly decide, okay, what is it that I want to get out of this time? What is it I want to get out of this investment?
Am I changing behaviors because of what I'm learning? That's what I consider development. Am I changing my behavior? Am I learning a new skill? Am I getting out of my comfort zone because of what I learned? And Dan, you and I talk about this all the time. People who know me know this. I have a problem with people who just want to learn. And they love to talk about how much they're developing themselves. But in reality, they're not at all. They're just learning a bunch of stuff, which is great, but it's not development.
Yeah, I think, number 1, knowing what you're trying to get out of the energy and time you're investing into learning, I think that's important. Number 2, I think you absolutely have to have some kind of practice mechanism or process
To apply.
I got into this deep rabbit hole, which I actually enjoyed on reading. And I do a lot of reading, and I know you do as well, Pam. And what I recognize is there's this thing called deep reading, and then there's this thing called like skimming or speed reading, right? And maybe all of us fall somewhere in between. And, I talk to a lot of people, and sometimes they'll be like, yeah, Dan, I read 12 books a year, or I read 24 books a year. And as I started doing this deep dive on reading, I'm like, you know what? That's just an ego thing. I mean, it's not a matter about how many you read, it's what are you getting from it? What are you accomplishing with it? How is it making what you're doing or who you are better? So there's a whole mess that we could talk about regarding that. But I think you have to have some kind of practice process where you're being able to role play in our world, practice, whatever it might be. Consistent feedback. That has to be a part of development for any of us. So it's one thing, right, to put the hours in and dedicate the hours, but you have to have some kind of objective feedback, someone sharing with you some opinions and thoughts, giving you a different perspective versus your own.
So in your opinion, the self-critique isn't enough to actually understand if I'm growing and getting better. Left on my own, my self-critique is not going to be near as powerful as asking someone else if they see progress.
Yeah, the best self-critique that I've seen is when you actually have someone listen to whatever it is, how you speak, what you share, how you ask your questions, maybe whatever it might be, right, regarding your conversations, or watch, or both. So like film study, as you know, Pam, we do a lot of that for our clients. Just watching your own film study is a good start, though, because you're going to be tough on yourself, which is great, or listening to your own speech, or listening to how you ask questions and how you might role play on your own, right? Those are all really good, but you want to get to that next level. You got to have some outside entity, outside opinion, outside individual share their thoughts, give you objective criticism.
Agreed.
Next thing I wrote down is has to be something that's consistent. Whether it's 20 minutes in the morning or whatever it might be, you got to build some kind of discipline and routine around it, because there are going to be times that you don't feel like investing in yourself. There's going to be times you might be tired. There's going to be times you might be worn out, right? There's going to be times that other pressing matters and priorities are going to come into play. But having a consistent time in your calendar, having some kind of discipline around it, is going to be very helpful to having a personal development plan.
Okay, I like that. And I do see that whether it's professional or personal development, I'm going to deploy this every now and again, almost as a tactic because I need a quick result. Like instead of overhauling your diet and being consistent with your choice, it's like, well, I'm going to go 2 weeks without eating sugar and hopefully I can lose 2 pounds. Or I'm going to try this upfront agreement because I've got this really important meeting and I'm going to see if this works. It is. It's funny how the consistency, for whatever reason, isn't top of mind when it comes to development. It's more of a, I'm going to try it when I need it type approach. I think both personally and professionally, a lot of times.
Yeah, there's a couple phrases that I came across. I came across building a personal operating system for growth quite a bit. But I also, in our vernacular, and for all the work that we've done, right, it's creating a personal development plan. So, there's a business plan, right? And we have a lot of clients who build and work on their business plans. I think part of that business plan has to be a separate plan, personal development plan.
Agreed. And how is the business plan going to come to fruition if I'm not evolving myself?
So I started thinking about where's a good place to start on a, personal or whatever professional development plan. So again, I'm going to go back to that first one, which is you got to think about where you're going. So if you're trying to figure out where to start, you have to have a future narrative, a little bit of a vision of where you're going. Right?
Okay. Right.
So I think in our world of sales, there can be lots in there where you could say, okay, here's where I'm going. I want to increase my success, my sales, my volume, the size of my business, 20%, 25%. Okay, great. There's a start. But then you got to have some pretty good self-awareness and get some outside feedback on what are the levers or mechanisms that need to improve or the ones that you need to adapt to experience that 20, 25% increase. And then how you're going to work on those levers, those skills, those behaviors, those routines. And then you have to try to build that into your daily and your weekly cycle of self-improvement, because it's just not going to happen on its own. It's one thing to identify it, which is a good start, but now you got to start putting the time aside to get some of that discipline so you can start improving it.
Agreed. And I was raised in the learn, apply, reflect, refine modeling. So I do think there's an aspect where I've got to reflect on it and then refine it. Reflect and refine was a big piece for me. I was notorious for, I'm going to learn and apply, and I never stopped to reflect or then refine.
One of the things that I know that you and I have done, but I also think we've been fortunate because it's part of our business. It's that, I think it's that Richard Feynman rule, right? The Richard Feynman process, which is when you read something, you learn something, stop, and then try to figure out how would you teach that to others, right? And I think that's been significant. And I think both of our developments where, we've had to so many times over the years do a deep dive on ourselves or give each other feedback and then figure out how do you make the adjustments to the feedback and what do you do to try to improve on based on whatever that feedback was.
Agreed.
And then learning how to then communicate that experience to others is very powerful. And that's what drives retention. It's funny, right? I go back to what I said earlier. Reading 24 books a year, great. Which ones did you remember and what did you remember? And then most importantly, really, what did you apply?
What did you apply in order to get better, to evolve, new habit, new skill, new behavior? Absolutely. So then do you think there can be such a thing as too much? And when does that happen?
It depends on how we're defining development, right? Self-improvement. I think if someone just reads 24 books and goes to seminars, and because they have a high verbal capacity to connect abstract thought processes, they might have a higher retention rate, which is fine. But just because they retain what they've read doesn't necessarily guarantee they're going to apply anything that they've read and retained.
That's just I know a lot. I don't do anything with it, but I know a lot. And I do think that is one of the implications of when it can be too much. When you're consuming all this information, that's great. You know a lot. It's not leading to making better decisions, building process, improvement. You just know a lot.
Yeah. And we do run into a lot of folks like that they'll go to a training session, right? They'll read a book and they'll tell you, yeah, I get that concept. I got it. Okay, you got it. Define how you got it, though. Again, I'm not trying to, well, maybe I am. Yeah, define how you got it. What does that mean? That you can write it out? Great. What have you done with it? How have you tried to utilize it, implement it to advance your skill set, your behaviors, and to advance your business, what you do professionally for a living? How does that equate?
Agreed. And I think there's a lot of people that fall into that bucket.
So going back to the original question on fatigue, I think that answer is going to depend on the person. Do I think there's more than likely a fatigue for all of us? Yes. What that fatigue level, though, is, I think is different based on each individual.
And paying attention to, again, how you're defining development, what it is you're looking to achieve with your development, both personal and professionally. But I know sometimes, Dan, and you know this about me, and I've worked very hard on it, but for me, sometimes my identity is wrapped up in becoming better. And I can overdo it because it's about me proving that I'm always looking to evolve as part of my identity. And I think for some of us, especially in the coaching world, that can become a little bit dangerous if you don't know why you're developing and what the intent is behind it. But I definitely suffer from that and have had several points throughout my career where I hook my identity to becoming better.
Yeah, I could understand that. I mean, there are times as I've gotten to know you where I've thought to myself, all right, Pam, that's awesome, but okay, enjoy it. Like, slow down for a second, right? Enjoy it.
Yeah, you don't have to constantly, what's the next thing? What's the next thing I'm going to do to improve myself?
Being around you, though, when you're going through that, you know, it can be motivating for others. Now, again, it can be demotivating for others for the 100%. Same reasons. But I think it's a personal thing. I mean, how much is too much? I think it's personal. While you're here, if you're finding this episode useful, you might also want to go back and listen to our recent episode, Designing a High Performance Day. It complements a lot of what we've been talking about here today. Let's look at sales, which is what our quote unquote on paper, or I don't know what you would call it, our expertise is, okay? Is one really ever an expert? I don't really know.
Good point.
But right, look at what we're supposedly pretty good at, okay? How much time do those that we coach invest in themselves, right? Do they invest 5 hours a week? Is it 2 hours a week? Is it 3? I can't tell you how many times, right, when we take on new clients, you've had to have these conversations too. We've talked about it where it's like 3 hours, 4 hours per month that an individual would have to invest in our training. And then there's concern about it, like it's too much. And here we are knowing that the high performers on multiple studies, lots of research, will spend 5 to 10 hours a week on improvement. And so many people get caught up with 3 or 4 hours a month. That's a big gap. There's a big discrepancy.
So why do you think that is, Dan? I'm interested to hear your perspective on this. I'm telling you that I want to be a high achiever. I'm telling you that I'm looking for different results regarding what I do for a living. I want to develop myself professionally and personally. Why do I poo-poo that? Why do I resist that? What's behind that?
Just on the basics without knowing somebody, it's a standard, it's an expectation that no one's taught them. All right. That'd be number one, is that I want to give everybody a fair shot. There's a good chance no one's ever truly laid out the groundwork for them on, all right, you want to be the best of the best? Here's some fundamentals that you're going to have to follow. I don't think anybody, number one, has laid that out for individuals. Number two,
fair point.
I think that our comfort zones kick in. Now everybody's different, but they can kick in really fast. You spend a little time learning something and it seems to work for you. There is some self-satisfaction and fulfillment in that. But then do you rest on that? And then if your performance numbers seem decent or above average, at least comparatively to others, do you then buy into that like you're fine where you are? I think there's a whole psychology there that would be interesting to explore regarding the comfort zones that we create for ourselves. And then that whole thought process around, I'm fine where I'm at.
I'm fine where I'm at, and I don't need this much development to be elite. I don't need this much.
I don't know who would ever say that. That's pretty bold, and that might lack a little self-awareness there.
Absolutely. Agreed. But I've definitely heard that. I've definitely heard that.
I want to be clear for our listeners that, and I'm sure they know, Pam and I are not here to dictate whether you're 2 hours a week or you're 12 hours a week. Right? But you do have to start thinking about a weekly investment, whether it is 2 hours or whether it's 5 or whether it's 10 per week. And you have to think about, what do you want to accomplish? This is the big one. Because even I know I've been guilty of this. Well, I'll put the time aside to do the reading. I'll put the time aside to listen to a podcast or 2 or 3, right? Or I'll put the time aside to do a workshop. But sometimes I just get caught up on the academic side that I feel really good because I just learned something pretty powerful. I connected some dots that I was not able to connect on my own, and then I feel really good about it. But what was the purpose of it, and what am I going to do with it?
Exactly.
So I do think we all got to be careful about how much we get caught up on the feel good of learning something new, and how that does drive a little bit of that maybe dopamine surge that we get.
I think it's so much more common than people think. So to your point, you got to get clear on what development means and what are you applying? What's your process for doing that? Are you coachable? I think that's another one, Dan.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Early on, I was not coachable. I was not coachable, and it bit me. And I don't think I understood that I wasn't coachable.
So I'm going to take another level. I'm coachable, but only by those I allow and choose myself to be coachable. And that's wrong. So I've caught myself many times where if I don't think I can learn something from that person, for whatever reason I've judged it that way, I will tune myself out. And I've caught myself several times and I've turned it around and said, nope, can't do that. And sure enough, just because I allowed myself to engage, I learned something from someone that I didn't think I could learn something from. And that's bad. I'm not proud of that. I want to be clear.
Everybody's done that. So the coachable piece is important too. You've got to be coachable.
Pam, how do you figure out if you're coachable? And if you're not, how do you try to change that? I mean, I know that's two big questions right there.
I think that goes back to are you seeking feedback? Are you trying to do this on your own? Are you seeking feedback? Are you seeking feedback from multiple perspectives to understand where you have to reflect and refine? And that's the piece where I was kind of like, I can figure this out. Okay, I know why I put this process in place. I can figure it out. And wow, oh wow, when my boss sat me down and said, well, who do you actually ask to determine if you're getting better in situations? Because your opinion on it, Pam, really doesn't matter. Your opinion on this doesn't matter. It's how others feel you're showing up in this different mindset, mentality, skill set, whatever it is that matters. Do people feel it? Do they see it? Are they experiencing it? And he's like, and you're not asking anybody for feedback on it. So I was just trying to own it all myself. And so to your point, Dan, I think you have to have some level of person that's helping you on this journey to evolve and get better. And that alone, how you react to that person, the dialogue you have will start to tell you whether or not you're truly coachable. And boy, I wasn't. And I had to get a thick skin in order to become coachable.
We all do, Pam. There's probably different levels of receiving feedback, right? But I know that the most important feedback is usually the one that stings the most at first. And it doesn't feel good for any of us. But that's the big feedback. That's the one that has a lot of power and a lot of value. I'm going to go back to fatigue here, because that's what this particular episode's about. You know, I think there's different types of fatigue. I think the fatigue because you read a lot and you try to consume lots of information and you become knowledgeable based on the academics of the information that you're consuming. I'm sure there's a fatigue there, but is it really a fatigue worth going through? Versus maybe you don't read a lot, but you do read some. You do go to workshops, but more importantly, you try to make that transition from learning the academics to applying them in real life. And I think when you go to apply things in real life and you're willing to risk the mistakes, you're willing to risk, Pam, like you said, the feedback, maybe there is a legit fatigue that you have to be aware of, where you're so uncomfortable, but you're right on the line, where you're uncomfortable enough where you're annoyed. Maybe you're uncomfortable enough where you're frustrated and agitated, but not so much uncomfortable that you're shutting down.
Well said. I like that, Dan.
I think there's a line there for all of us. I mean, what do they always say, right? When you're agitated, when you're frustrated, when you're annoyed, it's not because you've hit your ceiling. It's because you're moving through it. And so I think that's a great line for everybody to keep an eye on, where you're right there, as long as you don't shut down.
That's a good way to finish.
Do we want to summarize here for the listeners a little bit? Can you share maybe your top 5 thoughts regarding a personal development plan or / development fatigue?
So for our listeners, maybe think of development like this: learn, apply, reflect, refine. Do you have a standard in which you are learning, applying, reflecting, and refining? So I want to learn how to better start a meeting to bring the barrier between two people down. That's what I want to learn. So how am I going to do that? How do I then apply it? Okay, maybe I do that through recording myself and having myself and a coach listen to it. Okay, then to your point, I'm okay trying things, attempting things. I don't feel failure. So I continue to apply. I have a process for doing that. All right, so I'm learning how to start a meeting so I can bring that barrier that exists between two people down. I want people comfortable speaking their truth, even if it doesn't serve me. Here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to start recording my meetings and have a weekly session with a coach so I can understand what my starting point is. I take the feedback from the coach. I start applying it in my next meetings. So hopefully with these recordings, and I'm okay. I'm going to take chances because that's part of it. Then through a certain process, I'll reflect on that. Are we seeing any progress? How do I feel? I'm doing these new initiatives when I come into a meeting with somebody. Is it uncomfortable? Am I moving through it? And then how do I continue to refine that process so that, again, Dan, I'm a big fan now of, great, that's a skill I've honed in. Now I can move to the next one. So like, do you have a true process to develop behavior, skill, or habit through learn, apply, reflect, refine? And then how do I know it's too much? How do I know I'm suffering from a bit of fatigue? Maybe it's because I don't have a process like that in place. I'm consuming information at alarming rates because it makes me feel good intellectually, but I'm not really doing anything with it. That can feel a little bit like fatigue. Maybe my identity is caught up in development and I don't really understand if it's benefiting me as a human. I'm not slowing down to appreciate it. And maybe it's because I'm not moving through that fatigue because it's just gotten so hard and uncomfortable that I've convinced myself, oh, this is just too much and this is why I feel that way. So being aware of what you are feeling to determine if you're really suffering from fatigue or if you're right there and it's just time to move through it, or if you need to redefine how you look at development.
Yeah, I appreciate you going through that again, because I thought that's an easy way to build a little bit of a process around improvement. So I guess in summary for our listeners, put a personal development plan together. Keep it simple though. Number one, choose an area where you want to improve. Have a specific goal in mind, whatever it might be. I would say 2, make sure that you've put the time aside in your calendar, just like you would a workout. Put it aside in your calendar over multiple weeks and months. Build a little process around it. I would say 3, garner feedback outside yourself, right? So you can track a little bit better objectively on progress made. And then I would say 4, to your point, Pam, repeat.
Refine, repeat, refine, repeat.
Just keep it simple though at first. Maybe it's 2 hours a week. That's fine. But keep it simple. What I want you to take away from this conversation is that professional development isn't something you can just check off a list. It's not about how many books you've read or how many hours you've logged, but whether you're making the effort to put what you've learned to real practice. Telling people that you've read 24 books in 1 year might feel good, but did it impact your results? The real question is, when does fatigue hit and why? For example, does it set in after a webinar where your ego judges what you've just learned? And in its efforts to keep you safe, it determines what you're currently doing is just fine. Not because it's true, but it's the ego's effort to help you avoid trying something new, experimenting, and/or making a mistake. Fatigue caused by your ego downplaying new ideas and approaches is very different from fatigue caused by the consistent effort and practice of getting good at something new. Moving forward, keep your eye on what part of the development process you're in. Phase 1, learning. Phase 2, trying to avoid immediate judging. Phase 3, trying to stay objective. Finally, Phase 4, experimenting. Ideally, experiencing development fatigue in Phase 4 is where you will benefit the most from your efforts. Thanks for listening to Breaking Sales. If you're finding value in these conversations, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcast or Spotify. It really goes a long way. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time.